Onimusha Way of the Sword uses responsive, rewarding swordplay to become Capcom's anti-Souls-like. It's been nearly 20 years since the last Onimusha graced consoles, and yet, after spending roughly 30 minutes slicing and dicing through demonic warriors as a new wielder of the Oni Gauntlet, it's like Capcom's classic samurai series has never been away. I say this as someone who mostly looked upon those original PS2 games from afar, finding it a tad strange for all the ways it took the tentpoles of Resident Evil, such as the fixed camera angles and specific save zones, and retrofitted it onto the skeleton of a historical action epic with heavy fantasy elements. However, 2 decades on, this exact same method is working again, with Onimusha's intense yet accessible swordplay combat looking and playing great from a new third-person, over-the-shoulder perspective. In order to fully understand what Onimusha Way of the Sword is exactly, it's important to note what it isn't, and that's a Souls-like. Although From Software's tit-for-tat mode of combat and painfully hard bosses tend to bleed into most games of this ilk these days, Capcom is staunchly setting its game apart by making this new Onimusha far more approachable and, dare I say, appealing. Clashing blades with foes in Way of the Sword is less about fighting for your life at every turn, and more about making you feel like a badass samurai warrior. That said, it still does this in a way that makes you as a player feel like every slice, swing, and stab of the sword still matters.
Burn bright.
Way of the Sword manages to instill this feeling in a few ways. For one thing, there's the inclusion of the parry strike, where blocking using L1 at the exact right moment will see you riposte instantly with a devastating blow. So far, so standard. However, in addition to this, our hero Miyamoto Musashi also has a few other combat tricks up his sleeve. Dodging at the right time, for example, feels a gauge secondary to your stamina that when full can be activated to unleash a series of vicious slashes. This suddenly makes playing defensively just as valuable as fighting with aggression, with Way of the Sword rewarding players in the moment patience and quickness. If that wasn't enough, you can also tap the light attack button in time with when your enemy's blade clashes with yours, which if pulled off correctly will catch them off guard and leave them open to further attack. Specific timings and exact swordplay inputs like this give Onimusha Way of the Sword a different flavour than most of its genre peers. And better yet, it makes for a combat system that is simple on the surface, but fairly in-depth to master. I'm sure 30 minutes of play isn't enough to understand the full complexity of Way of the Sword's battle systems, yet so far, based on all the available actions I was able to try, this is a new Onimusha entry more than living up to its name. Obviously, it wouldn't be an Onimusha game without the iconic Oni Gauntlet, and here in Way of the Sword, it functions much the same. My demo gave me plenty of opportunities to soak the screen with the blood of my enemies, allowing me to absorb all kinds of blue, red, and yellow orbs into the gauntlet in the process. The Oni Gauntlet also allows Musashi to harness what's called Oni Vision, which promises to retain the franchise's light touch of puzzle elements by blocking players off from certain paths. Only by engaging Oni Vision can you then track down the route of the appropriate ghostly strand and then destroy it in order to reveal where to go next. It honestly took me aback just how well the design tenets of the more modern Resident Evil games have subtly, and in some cases not so subtly, bled their way into Onimusha Way of the Sword. The most obvious is the over-the-shoulder camera, which I was initially worried might feel too close for a melee combat game like this to work. After all, you want to be able to get a read on all that action. In actual fact, however, I quickly came to love it, with swordplay now more reminiscent of the recent God of War games for just how much more cinematic it all feels. Thankfully, the camera still always did a pretty good job of pulling back whenever necessary, letting me see the frantic action as needed. My demo culminated in a boss battle against a fellow swordsman and Oni Gauntlet owner called Sasaki Gamryu. It was here where the possibilities of true one-on-one combat were further hinted at, in a fast-paced confrontation that forced me to read Gamryu's attacks quickly and adapt as necessary. This is where my nature to dodge and clash his blade the same time he struck mine truly came in handy, giving me the chance to catch him off guard and take advantage of the opportunities whenever I left him staggered. The battle may have been over in merely a few minutes, but it was enough to solidify to me that a boss confrontation doesn't need to be tooth-pulling in order to be effective. Plus, a QTE moment where the action slowed severely and gave me the choice between targeting his arm or head worked to break up the otherwise energetic affair quite nicely. From this one boss fight alone, I can tell that Onimusha Way of the Sword intends for everyone to feel like a true momentous event. Overall, I went into my 30-minute demo of Onimusha Way of the Sword with little to no expectations. I expected that what Capcom has been cooking up to be good, of course, and it is, but for different reasons that left me pleasantly surprised. The main one being that this is an old school revival that knows how to modernize elements of the original games while also confidently keeping one foot in the past, retaining what makes Onimusha, well, Onimusha. It also helps that Way of the Sword's combat feels refreshingly approachable yet still in depth, making for a more arcade-style historical action game that isn't afraid to make you a master of the blade through devilish tactics and thoughtfully bloody sword swipes. It seems that Capcom is on track to treat Way of the Sword with the same love, care, and attention it did for its recent Resident Evil revivals. I'm already sharpening my sword, ready for the next chance that I get to play. If you like this video and you want to see more, be sure to leave it a like and consider subscribing to the All Out Gaming YouTube channel to stay up to date with even more videos like this. Until next time, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.